Well, let's now pass to the final and most difficult part of this lecture, namely the addressing of global ethical issues and basic scientific aspect. Ladies and gentlemen, until I accept the privilege, I consider a privilege, of being a citizen of the United States of America, for which reason I'm bearing for this lecture the American flag, it is my duty to denounce the status of basic science in our country, for a very simple reason that, as now admitted by many, although not yet by all, our country is in a fast and rapid decline. Unless this process is stopped with some form of revitalization, of rebirth, then the decay may reach levels that are uncontrollable. Already now, as a scientist, I am forced to reach abroad for a number of measurements, basic measurements that I used to do in the United States, not anymore. When in my work as a scientist of a number of corporations, I'm forced to buy abroad a number of even fundamental items such as, or materials such as electrodes or carbon, or basic process such as pressure swing adsorption for the separation of hydrogen. I could find non-commercially anymore available in the United States. And this trend has been not only increasing in time, has been accelerating with time. So conclusion, again, until I accept the privilege, which I consider a privilege, of being a citizen of the United States of America, I have to speak out and present my view and my denunciation of the origin of this decay for what I can do, which is the scientific part. In any case, I believe that the decay in science is one of the primary reasons of the decay in other branches of other segments of our life. Because science, the decay in science gives you the temperature of the entire country in any case. Vice versa, if we manage, as we will propose at the end of this final part, if we manage to promote a structural rebirth of our science, a new renaissance, which in America is possible, indeed, is not only is opposed by organized interest in Einstein, but is has already occurred in America. I am an American. The point is that by surpassing Einstein, there is an endless number of new technology. We have already new fuel, a series of new fuels with a new chemical structure that is now sold all over the world. New chemical structure with new principle of all based on surpass of Einstein. We already have established truly controllable fusion that emits no harmful radiation and release no radioactive waste. They are truly controllable. They've been confirmed by independent nuclear physicists. This and many others are not dreams. All these possibilities for America are suppressed, truncated, discredited by organized interest on Einstein theory. So unless we have a courage, first of denouncing this organized interest, and then eliminating them from our land, ladies and gentlemen, America is doomed. I'm sorry. I have no doubt about that. It will decay, until finally the decay will be so dramatic beyond any level of retrieval that indeed will lead to major civil, financial, and political and military upheavals, which are already on the horizon, faraway horizon, thanks God, but they are there for everybody who cares about the country can see. Well, to understand, to denounce this collapse of ethic with consequence of enormous damage to our country as well as to mankind, we have to review some concrete cases of what can only be defined of scientific banditism by high-ranking scientists with using a river of money from the US taxpayer. So the banditism was perpetrated under public financial support. The documentation is enormous. In 1984, I wrote a book, Il Grande Grido, with 3 volumes of documentation in 1,315 pages. I believe no appraisal of the gravity of this global collapse of ethics can be even dreamed without at least inspecting the documentation and in that work. As well, there are many others denunciation of this situation. After I left Harvard University, because of irreconcilable disagreement on scientific and ethical issue with my former colleagues there, Steven Weinberg, Shelley Glashow, and the late Sidney Coleman, after I obstructed my research while I was at Harvard in an unbelievable way, very deplorable, keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that I was supported by the United States Department of Energy. I had grants from the Department of Energy. So therefore, those individuals, Steven Weinberg, Shelley Glashow, and Sidney Coleman, opposed the will of the United States of America. And what was the will of the United States of America? Put the foundation at the mathematical and then at the physical level of the surpassing of Einstein's doctrine, which will be inevitable. Humanity cannot die with Einstein. No, Einstein is a magnificent episode in the history of mankind, now surpassed mathematically, physically, chemically, at all levels, many times over. Even to this surpassing continues to be suppressed in academia. So, after leaving Harvard University because of this incredible act of banditism, there are acts of banditism. For instance, I received the first year I received a grant from the Department of Energy. It's fully documented. They asked me the nature of the research. I presented it technically as doing a Lie admissible covering of the Lie theory and studied a Lie admissible generalization of Galilei relativity. That eventually this immediately they saw that was surpassing were the premises for the surpassing of Einstein. Technically, when you surpass Lie algebra, you surpass Einstein. So this is known by experts. So the moment I presented to the faculty of the Lyman Laboratory of Physics at Harvard University the program accepted by the Department of Energy, actually encouraged and requested because of the implication for new fuels and energy that were known since at that time, then I was prohibited to receive my salary from my own grant for 1 entire year, in full knowledge that at that time, we are talking about academic year 1977, 1978, I had young children to feed and shelter that were in tender age. This is the extreme that those individuals have achieved in the dream of bending me to abandon this line of research in surpassing Einstein theories. Then there are many other denunciations by several other authors of this collapse of ethics that are available by a search in the Google or Yahoo. Well, let's review a few cases. After leaving Harvard University in August 1981, our group, that in the meantime had grown to a worldwide dimension, decided to organize our own institute. We call it the Institute for Basic Research. We purchased a Victorian within the compound of Harvard University, the Prescott House, and we initiated study there in September. And there was an official, beautiful ceremony of inauguration with physicists from various countries. We elected to remain in Cambridge for one reason, because we needed a library. This is not needed anymore because of the internet. Okay, well, after leaving Harvard, having our own institute and doing our own things, we were hoping that colleagues at Harvard will leave us alone and do our job. No way. We were the victim of continuous harassment, discreditation, attacks, and via acts that can only be identified to be true as act of scientific banditism. Now, most people will not believe that those acts, because the primary person responsible, which are Weinberg, Glashow, and Coleman at Harvard. Weinberg is a Nobel Prize, Glashow is a Nobel Prize, and Coleman was a very famous scientist in Einstein theory. However, there is an episode that is fully documented with eyewitness still alive that I would like to report. It is the following. The local university in the area, in the Boston area, 7 of them, jointly decided to suppress the listing in the Boston area physics calendar of the seminar by distinguished visitors of our institute. Now, this the taxpayers, as well as fellow Americans seriously interested in the well-being of our country, should meditate a moment on the implication of this act. First of all, the act established that we are indeed dealing incontrovertibly with an organized structure that suppresses undesired advances. Because it's not only we have 3 individuals at Harvard, but then we have all their friends at 7 different universities. So the episode established the organized. That's why I use the word organized. But that's not enough. Next, you have to understand that the IBR at that time was still under the support from the Department of Energy. So they suppressed the listing of seminars conducted under a formal program of the United States government. Ladies and gentlemen, if you care about America, you have to understand that this organized structure against new knowledge is work with such an impunity, for reason we will identify clearly later on here before the end of this lecture, that they oppose the will of the government of the United States. They've done so with impunity for decades. As a matter of fact, this is an episode in the early 80s. They've done worse since at that time, because of the guaranteed impunity by the government, incidentally, as we will see. In any case, there is Hussein Yilmaz, where I remember his horror in his face when he saw that this seminar at our institute, the presence of visitors from various countries, and the listing had been suppressed in the Boston area physics calendar. Why? Because the title of Yilmaz's talk was on the necessity of adding first-order source terms in the right-hand side of the field equation, and as we have seen, this implied the collapse of virtually the entire books and monographs that have been written in gravitation. So with large financial implication. Finally, to understand the implication of this, only one episode among thousands, only one episode, you must have seen the disgust in the face of distinguished scientists that were visiting us when they left America with the pledge never to return. Because this is suppression of the most elementary rule of scientific democracy, the most elementary. Not to ignore the suppression of human dignity as well as scientific values. But this is all. But there are many other episodes on that. There is one I have to remember, because there are certain acts that if we ignore it means we don't care, and means we favor the decay. Unless the problems are identified with clarity and the responsible people are identified, we will never solve we'll never turn the trend of a decay of our country toward a new birth. Another episode I have to remember, and that was perpetrated this time by the late Hermann Feshbach at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The issue was that addressed in the second lecture on the limitation of introductory lecture on the limitation of quantum mechanics, namely that quantum mechanics in one century has been unable to represent the magnetic moment of nuclei. The most plausible interpretation of this failure was that when protons and neutrons are bonded together into a nuclear structure, their charge distribution is deformed. Remember the gesture I made a number of times in here that I do in my lecture, but it's a gesture you will never see in the best PhD courses in the United States of America or in most European countries. Namely, just to remind that perfectly rigid bodies do not exist. Now, what happened? An experimentalist. So we propose to test the deformability of neutrons under sufficiently strong external nuclear fields. And we propose this to be, that experiment to be done by neutron interferometry, technically via the so-called 2-pi symmetry experiment. I think it's described briefly in lecture 3A. An experimentalist leaders in the field of neutron interferometry, Professor Rauch, head of Atomic Institute in Vienna, was working precisely in that field. And he had indeed his initial measurement by using thermal neutron beams in Grenoble indicated precisely the predicted 1% deformation of the neutron that will immediately allow an exact numerical representation of the magnetic moment of the deuteron and solve an historical problem. What Hermann Feshbach did to suppress this experiment is simply unbelievable, but is documented in all details in the 3 volumes of documentation of Il Grande Grido. The obstruction reached such a level that through his friends in Grenoble, he prohibited Professor Rauch to have access to his own experimental setup. And the experiment has been suppressed ever since. The neutron interferometric measurements have been done, but adulterated in a very transparent way by carefully avoiding that neutron beam is exposed to strong nuclear fields, under which the deformation is minimal, and therefore it's a total useless waste of public money. Why? Hermann Feshbach, at that time chairman of the Department of Physics of MIT, went to such extreme of losing his dignity, losing his face in face of an international audience, because the experimental verification that the neutron is deformable implies that the limitation of Einstein's special relativity, that is why, as well as of relativistic quantum mechanics, is always the same ultimate origin, organized interest on Einstein theory first, and therefore on relativistic quantum mechanics, which follows as a consequence. Because of this, another episode of true scientific banditism, I left the Boston area, and then I moved very happily to Florida. I want to close this recollection with my personal view. I don't expect you to agree, but allow me to express it. It is my opinion that organized interest in the Boston area, in the physics community of the Boston area, have attempted systematically and in a way protracted over decades, and under total impunity that will be identified in a moment, have attempted to implement the worst form of slavery, which is the slavery of the mind. The unfortunate slavery of the African American was for their body. They still remain with their soul and their mind, free their mind to maintain their value, their religions, their ideal, their dreams. What the organized interest on Einstein in the Boston area have attempted the worst form of slavery, because the suppression of even the smallest possible spark of novelty over their beloved Einstein theory. This has been proven, ladies and gentlemen, beyond credible doubt. Let's pass to other identification of proven of evidence without which we cannot draw a conclusion. Another case that has to be denounced if we really care about America is the behavior of the journals of the American Physical Society. In a nutshell, the hadronic mechanics and chemistry have now been studied all over the world. They have now industrial applications, let alone scientific, experimental verification, industrial application, various industrial applications. New technology being developed in China as we speak. With a total number of publication of over 30,000, estimated number 30,000 pages have been published in the field, in journals all over the world. At the journals of the American Physical Society, the name hadronic mechanics does not exist. Why? Because of the systematic rejection of hundreds of papers, not dozens, hundreds of papers, not only by me, but the numerous scientists the world over in surpassing quantum mechanics and special relativity. The rejection, all with hypothetical and political motivation, none with any serious motivation, only with the rejection is Dr. Santilli, the author does not understand particle physics, or the author is unaware of this theorem that has nothing to do with the connection of the paper. Clearly manipulated rejection have reached such an extreme that there has been a prohibition for decades to publish papers in the American Physical Society that will even quote Santilli. This is documented by many scientists. You can imagine the reaction of this. At one point, the behavior of the editor of the American Physical Society was so indecent from human viewpoint, let alone scientific viewpoint, that we approached Senator Billy Ruggero and exposed the problem to the senator. The senator was very receptive, very cooperative, and immediately wrote a letter to the president of the American, editor-in-chief of the American Physical Society of the time, Leon Lederman. Lederman answered to Senator Billy Ruggero, papers are rejected because Dr. Santilli does not understand particle physics. Dr. Santilli does not understand particle physics. Those are papers that were technical, with theorems and extremely detailed mathematical and physical elaboration, most of them with experimental verifications. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why our country is in a down spiral of decay. This is the reason for corruption, because this is sheer corruption, not only scientific, but beyond scientific level. We will return on Lederman on another aspect in a second. And so there are so many other acts of banditism, all perpetrated with the certainty of impunity. The certainty of impunity. We will see in a moment. By the government. By our government. Because of the complicity of our government. As another episode, in 1992, I was prohibited to be part of the 7th workshop on hadronic mechanics that was held under public support at the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. Now, keep in mind that I am the initiator I am the father of hadronic mechanics. At that time, as it is now, I'm still the most active author in the field. I was prohibited. Under public support, ladies and gentlemen, any American who even suspects that we have a scientific democracy in the United States of America today for qualified inquiry, that person needs medical attention, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot put it otherwise, because there is a limit of evidence beyond which when the evidence is denied, either because of complicity or because of need of medical assistance, and so on, etc., etc. The other prohibition to attend workshop at Fermilab, etc. But what are them? And then, of course, discreditation at all at the worldwide level. If you if you look at my so-called article, they call it article, at the so-called on me, at the so-called free encyclopedia, the Wikipedia. You see, everything that I presented in this lecture, in all this lecture, they call it fringe science. Fringe science. Why? Why fringe science? Because the moment you dub a line of research fringe science, you are automatically prohibited from publishing in journals of a medical physical society, and you are prohibited to get money from the grants. Because Wikipedia is normally used by referee in the reviewing process. Unfortunately, rather than using papers, they use political manipulation via Wikipedia. So how can America turn this down spiral without first resolving this horrendous decay of scientific ethics at so many levels? But this is not only, but the correspondent of this organized cartel, scientific cartel in the United States of America. Some of them, they call it organized scientific crime. Is a word now very routinely used, especially abroad. I'm sorry to repeat it, but I hope this may wake up some of our fellow Americans on the gravity of the situation. Is that the correspondent, the friends of our members have reached to the dissident scientists all over the world. For instance, the Professor Logunov in Russia, who was known to be outspoken critic, very valuable, was director of the laboratory of high energy physics in Protvino. Was not a little guy. Was one of the leading scientists in Russia. Has been silenced and totally terminated, removed from any activity in the academic community. This is very shameful for Russia, because it's in violation of all the history of that country for scientific freedom and the pursuit of new knowledge. Similar episodes are in England, in France, Italy, many similar episodes, so many that are unbelievable.